Know if I could preach this Sunday, and I told him no, because I was afraid. But it's good. It's a good opportunity. My sermon is a little bit indulgent and a little bit personal, so that's my one and only apology for that. Can I tell you about the first time that I came here, first time that I came to Boston, to the corner of Dorchester Street and Minton Street, Fourth Presbyterian Church. It was the winter of 2005. I was a student at Princeton Theological Seminary. I had to do a church internship. So I went and talked to David Wall, who works for the seminary, and I said, I want a church that's in the city, gay-friendly, loves Jesus, and is doing stuff in the neighborhood. It felt like a joke when I said it out loud, but I put it out there. I didn't know that David was a longtime friend of Fourth Church. And he said, oh, well, you have to talk to Burns. So I called Burns, and I still remember that conversation, pacing back and forth in my dorm room, talking to him on the phone. And he said, you know, I think this could work. And at the time, I didn't know that he says that to all the interns who say that they are interested in work here. But he said, you know, I think this could work. But what you really need to do is you need to come up here and you need to visit. And there was this skinny, redheaded guy named David Pierce at Princeton who also was interested in working here. So we decided to take a long weekend and drive up to Boston. And of course, that week there was a huge snowstorm. We decided to come anyway, and we dug out my car, and we got in, and we started on this trip up to Boston. It was not the car that I drive now. It was the old 1996 Toyota Camry. And it had driven thousands of miles, and it had had like 9 lives, and it looked busted. I mean, it was rusted. It had missing spots of paint. And so before I came up here, I decided to buy the cheapest paint job that you could get. So it didn't cost that much, but when it was done, the car looked shiny and blue and new, and we were ready to go. But that didn't solve the problem that there was no antifreeze, and the wipers didn't work that great. And so as we were driving up 95, every few miles, we rolled down the passenger side window, and David would stick his body out the window and was dumping from a gallon jug of antifreeze onto the windshield as we wiped it. And going very slowly, we finally made it late in the night, not all the way into the city, thank God, but at least to Mansfield. That was my first night staying at the Pierce house. Pierce family, of course, the brother of Jonathan, who I had not met yet, but that's another story. The next morning, we were relieved to see that the terrible weather had turned into a beautiful, clear, sunny, freezing cold New England day. So we walked out to the car, and I was surprised to see that my beautiful, shiny blue Camry had this weird spider web pattern all over it. Actually, the paint had just cracked all across the whole car. So I thought that maybe it would just make like a cool kind of like pinstripe pattern that I could live with. But as the car got up to about 45 miles an hour, little pieces started to flick off into the air like tiny blue flowers. And by the time we got onto 95, the whole car just shimmered and shattered, and the entire paint job blew off in one giant blue explosion. It was like the car was just throwing off its clothes in a dramatic huff as we headed towards Eden Square. And by the time we got to Minton Street, it was the old, naked, rusted, and busted Camry that I had had before. But we parked the car, we got out, we went inside, the door of a broom closet opened, and out came Burns, because of course that was his office, for just 5 minutes. And he took us for lunch at Victoria's Diner, and the rest was history. Now you may be asking yourselves, what does that story have to do with the 3 wise men? It wouldn't be crazy to ask that question. But see, this is my last Sunday here for a little while. Because I'm so full of thoughts and feelings. But I also have not forgotten the first time, the time I came down 93 in a blue street. Please pray with me. God, we need your presence, we need your light. I need it. Everybody needs it. So be with us. Amen. This is Epiphany Sunday, 2 weeks after Christmas Eve, which we call Little Christmas. And you could also think of it as Christmas the sequel, because although almost everyone shamefully squeezes the wise men into their Christmas Eve pageants, and although Caden and Owen and Elijah Blue did an amazing job, and although Bobby Hicks was wearing a Joe to Go box as a crown, who does that, The three wise men weren't really there on Christmas Eve. They get their big moment today, a few weeks later, on Epiphany, the day that the bright morning star led them to the light of the stable. And I actually know of one church that takes their wise men figurines and sets them on a different windowsill of the sanctuary all through Advent and Christmas to symbolize the long, long journey of the wise men towards Bethlehem. And who were these visitors anyway to be called the three wise men, or the wise ones, or we three kings, or the magi? And Matthew doesn't say that there were three of them, by the way. We just know that they came from the east, and they were known for their wisdom and their knowledge of the stars. They were not Jewish. They were probably scientists, and they were possibly, wait for it, magicians. Pagan astrologists from another land. And earlier this week, I very much enjoyed reading a sermon by Martin Luther, where he went to great lengths, paragraph after paragraph, to make sure that we understood that the wise men were not wizards, not devils, did not practice the dark arts. They were just scientists from the country next door. And maybe he's right about that, but isn't it strange that the gospel of Jesus Christ includes these details about strangers from another faith and another country coming to visit the baby? And the poet T.S. Eliot wrote this beautiful poem called The Journey of the Magi, which is about that trip to Bethlehem. And he writes it in their own voice, saying, "A hard time we've had it of it. At the end, we preferred to travel all night, sleeping in snatches with the voices singing in our ears, saying that this was all folly. Because, of course, they must have felt foolish. They were magician scientists from the east, following a star through the night in a foreign country in search of the son of someone else's god." And as usual, all the information that I most want to know is not included. Namely, why, after years of practicing science and or astrology and or magic, did they decide that it was time to seek out Jesus? Presumably, it was not because they had been reading their Bibles, or had a Jewish friend who shared with them the good news, or because their wise lady friends dragged them to the temple, or because they received the upper room devotional. Those are all the ways that we pride ourselves on getting the word out. But no, the Bible doesn't say how they knew about Jesus, or why they cared to pay him a visit. But they followed the stars that they knew so well, and they led them to Mary and to Joseph and that little baby. And they brought those famous gifts, even though we can't always remember what the gifts were or what they mean. They brought the gold and the frankincense and the myrrh. And I want right here to resist the temptation to make this sermon about those gifts, to talk about the items that they brought, or what they meant, or what they signified, or that they're present in the Old Testament and that Isaiah reading. All that is true. But I want to focus instead on this strange moment of encounter, the moment when the barn doors opened and the wise men saw the baby Jesus and fell to their knees in joy. I want to focus on the moment when the barn doors opened and Mary and Joseph saw three or more magician scientists standing outside, peering in the windows. Because I think that moment is an amazing gift all its own. You know, without a doubt, there have been times here in my job when I felt more like a magician scientist than a minister. What other youth minister asks two deacons to help build him a levitation machine for the winter magic show? Or buys 15 2-liters of Diet Coke so that we can explode them down in Oakley Park? Or borrows dry ice from the Brandeis Science Lab? We made snow sculptures of Rob Bell and we unveiled a live chicken on Easter Sunday. And believe me when I say that I understand that these are not likely to be parts of my ministry in the future. And believe me when I say that there were times that I worried that I was not a minister at all. My friends graduated from seminary in 2006, and many of them went on to become the pastors of traditional Presbyterian churches across the country. And here was I, a gay magician scientist, not welcome to be ordained, but very welcome to push a shopping cart with googly eyes and craft glue down to the Marion McCormick Projects to teach my Megaphone Arts and Crafts class. And now don't get me wrong, I love so much of that work. But at times, the voices, like the wise men, were in my ears saying, maybe this is all folly. Nonetheless, over the last 5 years, I was propelled forward in ways that were sometimes churchy, sometimes every bit as mysterious as the stars. But almost every day of my life, Jesus has been calling me. And one of the ways in which I've been called and propelled forward is in my ridiculous, heartfelt, heartbreaking love for this neighborhood and for this church, for you people. And I can talk about almost every person in the room, and I can make a long list of the gifts that I've received from you. But what I really want you to hear is that the most precious gift that I received from the Fourth Presbyterian Church are those unexpected moments of encounter with Christ. When the doors suddenly opened, or the veil dropped, and the world grew silent, and I caught a glimpse of the holy. The funny thing is that a lot of you probably have no idea that you brought those gifts to me, because they usually don't arrive on Christmas Eve, and they don't come with choirs of angels. I've seen the holy when Karen Foley is worshiping God, her hands in the air, her eyes closed, rocking back and forth during a choir anthem. I've seen Andy Chaparro cook over 56,000 meals in my 8 years of summer meals, and that's not all the ones that she's made, that's just the ones that I've seen. And on Wednesday nights, when there are 25 kids in here eating Andy's food and interacting with church adults and doing their homework cheerfully, I've seen the holy. I've seen the holy in a sweet note that Ariella wrote and left on the door of my office, making sure that I knew that the work that I did here was not unappreciated. I saw the holy when Kenny Shallow came to my apartment, fixed my thermostat, brought me coffee, told me what was wrong with me, told me what was wrong with him, told me that God loved both of us in spite of it all. When Michelle Sanchez made me feel like I needed to read John Calvin for fear of missing out, I saw the holy. And last week, when Billy and Matt and Leon and Joelle prayed for me and prayed for each other as a way of ending our Harambe group, which had lasted for years, that was such a gift. Such a gift. I've seen old enemies reconcile. I've seen shy children sing beautiful solos. I've seen Burns play the piano and the trumpet at the same time. With so many stars in the sky, how could I have not found my way to the Christ child? And so for that, I say thank you, thank you, thank you. I say look to the sky and see the 1,000 ways that God loves you too. I say keep moving forward. I have one more story to share, one more gift that I received. This goes all the way back to 2005, that first awkward field education summer. Burns went on a 2-week vacation. And it's not a scientific fact. Have you guys noticed weird stuff happens here when Burns goes on vacation? And in this case, there was a member of this community. He's actually not lived here for years. And he was going through a really hard time. He was depressed. And in one really dark night, he tried to hurt himself. He was hospitalized in a psychiatric unit. Now, did I mention that Burns was on vacation? I had been in the church for 4 weeks as a seminary intern. I didn't have any experience with issues of depression. I'd never been to that kind of hospital, and I decided I was not going. I was not going to visit. That was not my job. And who did I presume to be anyway to think that that would be appropriate? So no, I wasn't going to the hospital. And then I got a call on my phone. I answered it, and it was Sonny. He was calling from that desk right back there in Veterans Hall. He said, "You gotta go. Somebody has to go. You gotta go. It's your job." Did I mention that Burns was on vacation? So I got on the T, and I went to this hospital, and I was terrified. I had no idea what was waiting for me behind those doors, and I was worried that maybe this whole trip was folly. But the nurse let me in and took me to his room, and when he saw me, he came over to me, and he wrapped his arms around me, and he was weeping so hard that I got these wet spots on my shirt, and he said, "Thank you so much for coming." And then we walked up and down those shiny hallways, and he would open the other doors of the unit and stick his head in and say, "Hey, guess what? My pastor is visiting. I want to introduce you to my pastor." He saw something in me that I had not yet dared to see in myself. It was an unexpected encounter with a stranger who gave me an unexpected gift. It was a glimpse of the holy. You know, the Presbyterian Church decided in 2010 that it was okay to ordain gay people as pastors. That didn't come as breaking news to me because I've been receiving that good news from the Fourth Presbyterian Church for years. The wise men went home by another road. They had to, having seen what they had seen, knowing that King Herod wanted to hurt the baby. They had to because their lives were different after they met Jesus. And in the midst of all that excitement over the birth of the Christ child, they also had to deal with the death of the life that they had before that. And I feel all that joy and all that grief as I participate in this final worship service. I'm joyful for a new ministry, and I'm joyful that I'll be back here in February for my ordination. But I grieve the knowledge that things will not feel the same. And I miss knowing every little thing that happens here, and I'll miss singing in the choir, and I will miss the kids and the youth so much. And I will dearly miss working with Burns and being a part of the neighborhood. But I take comfort in knowing that my time here has formed me deeply in a way that will last forever. I take comfort in knowing that the relationships that I enjoy here will continue in different ways. I take comfort in knowing that Katie Cole is going to be so good at this job. I take comfort in knowing that the God who has brought us this far is still the author and perfecter of all our stories. So maybe in the end, it's not that different from that old Toyota Camry going down 93 in a big blue cloud of paint chips. We are each one of us on a journey that is taking us to a new place, and along the way we are going to be transformed, and it's disturbing and beautiful at the same time. But God is taking us to the light of the stable. And we may look a hot mess at the moment, but God is making us all into something new. Amen.